Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. This is going to be podcast 49, and looking forward to seeing everybody here. George, Matt, Julian, thanks again for coming on. I'm really excited we're doing this. It's been a long time since we've done another podcast, let alone one with four people. So thanks again for coming.
Yeah, of course. I'm
Happy
pretty
to be
hyped
here.
to be here.
Right on. So today's topic is going to be about okay, you have your first job, you're coming out of secondary school, whether it's college, trade school, that kind of thing, and you're hopping right in. What's some of the advice that we can give to that type of person? So, Matt, can you start us off with like maybe one of the first tips of advice that you'd give to somebody that's starting off in this position?
Uh, yeah. So, I mean, I guess if nobody out there listening knows, I've been through college twice with a gap in between. Um, and I guess coming out of it, it was a very different scenario. The first time was a non-engineering, non-science major, and at that point, I was just trying to get whatever I could get, which not bad advice by itself. I guess a lot depends on what your circumstance is, what the job market is like, um, how easy it is to get interviews. Uh, Sometimes taking what you can get is a good thing, and you don't have to stay there, but people want to hire people who are working. They don't want to hire people who are not working because they can read a lot more into why you're not working than why you're working because they want you to work for them. So if you're working, that's already a mark in your column. Um, when I came out of school the second time with engineering, science related would probably be in the same category. It's in demand. There's not a lot of people that do it, which already gives you a leg up. Um, Even if you have technical skills that lend themselves to that whatever field you're looking at, that's a good thing. You should lean on those. You should go for it. Um, but I guess my decision was a little bit different that time because I had a few offers that started rolling in after I had graduated. Um, One of them was working for the company that I was interning for when I graduated. Um, One of them was in automation, which I'm doing now. Another one was in engineering project management, and another one was working for a former company that I had interned for, kind of doing the same thing in the manufacturing and science lab that I've been working in. Um, and I picked automation to do because I guess at the time and even now, automation is the future. It's the whole thing out there. And I had never done it before, and I had an opportunity to do it. So I figured, all right, I'm gonna go with it. Um, After I'd done that, a few of the places that had offered me a job came back and came at me harder. And they were kind of like, well, why are you picking this place? Tell me how much they're offering you. We'll offer you more. We'll give you more vacation. What do you want? Just come work for us. And I, I guess I wasn't really prepared for that. But in the end, they offered me, I think, maybe like $20,000 a year more, maybe one week more of vacation a year than I would have started out where I was working. Um, and I turned it down because that was the engineering project management job. It didn't seem to me like it was enough of a unique skill set that I wouldn't be at risk at some point of being downsized. And that was my goal. I did engineering because I didn't want to be jobless again, which was what threw me back to going into school the second time did. So I stuck with automation. I figured it was going to be a better skill set to gain than just work on more project management and people management skills. And I was right because I think 2.5 years after I would have taken that job, I probably would have been downsized because other people that I knew there had been downsized, or moved around. And at that point, you kind of have to take what you can get. And so I don't know. Over the long term, um, going with the biggest salary to me ended up a lot better than if I had just chased money. So I would say that there's a lot that went into that. I'd like to think that there's a lot that went into that, but at the time, it was more, what skills am I gaining from this job? What am I going to be gaining from this job outside of money? And I think that paid off pretty handsomely. There were some other things about the company that were nice, but starting out, you don't know those things. Um,
Well said, Matt. Yeah, and
Yeah.
people forget about the skill set that you're going to be getting, not just like what type of job is it. Um, George, do you have anything else to add about what's going on with like helping somebody that's getting into their first job?
Yeah, I agree with Matt. 'Cause, you got to kind of pick something, and you don't really have too many options when it's your first job, right? Everyone wants to say like, we want someone with experience. How do you get that experience if it's a entry level job, right? And so yeah, plus one on what Matt said, that be okay with doing whatever. I think I would add that you should explore kind of your skill sets in your first job. Because a lot of people have an expectation, and I see this. It's funny when I was hiring at Phillips, fresh out of college grads. I see a lot of like the 4.0 kind of like high grade where it's very structured. They know what they need to do. They're given good instructions. And so when you get into, I guess this is specific to engineering jobs, but you don't have that structure anymore. You're told, well, you take ownership over so and so project. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do. And it's like, well, you have these accolades. You're smart enough to figure it out. And so they kind of get stuck in doing the same thing over and over again. And I feel like that's like the beginning of the person that does, the 15-year career in doing the same kind of like stuff over time, right? Like you can start like a project engineer, senior project engineer, then your staff project engineers. So if that's the route that you want to take, it's kind of more structured. But I would really implore people, and I always do this with like the interns that I interact with, like just explore. Like in internships, if you're lucky enough to have them, definitely like go around different departments, like talk to people, see what people's like career journeys are. And then when you have your responsibilities as like, you're now a full-time employee, no one expects you to, have a savings of like $500,000 or like expect you to have this like glamorous superstar project the first time. Like everybody wants it, but in reality, I tell people, don't rush to it. Don't rush to be the big fish. Like you'll get there. Like people, there's like a cycle you'll see. Like people at the high end tend to retire, and then you'll kind of like move along the chain. But definitely explore what you like, because I didn't know what I liked. I started as a biochemical engineer in biotech for my internship. I never thought of going into oil and gas. And as Matt said, like, kind of be open to doing anything. And so I was, and I did it. And now it's like the core skill that I have is being gritty, because you have to be gritty in like those rough environments of oil and gas, like you being in Texas. Maybe you're lucky enough to be offshore, overseas. Like school doesn't prepare you for any of those things, right?
Did not a bit.
Yeah. So you have to be open, and you just explore yourself, explore how you are as a full time employee. College doesn't teaches you how to be a full time employee. It teaches you skills, not what's your like honing in on your skills. That's like the first 5 years of your career, you're kind of honing your skills. Like I think after year 2 or 3, I thought I would be like more of a technical person, and people were like, "Yeah, you're pretty good technical," but I would think, and I got this feedback from my managers, like your core skill is actually communication. Like you communicate, you collaborate very well, and that's something that we see in like managers. That's something because like manager are more people managing, right? As opposed to like project engineers or project managers, it's resource managing, which is more that technical. So yeah, you kind of have to kind of know yourself a little bit the first year. Try to figure yourself out.
For sure.
Or at
Jacob,
least learn from your
when you were starting your first job, you were kind of thrown into the deep end and faced a huge gauntlet of challenges after challenges. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because even though I've heard the story multiple times, it's still quite the experience you have to go through.
Sure. You want to hear about the field engineering experience? Yeah, I can tell you
Yes.
that kind of thing. So I was fortunate enough to get this job 6 months before school ended. So before all of us graduated in 2014, um, I had this job like lined up in January, and I was pretty psyched because then now it's just finish school and get on with it, right? But it was just so different than everybody else's in terms of cool. So I'm gonna pack my bags. I'm gonna go over to Texas. I'm gonna go to Williston, North Dakota. I'm gonna go to the Middle East and the United Arab Emirates, and I got to do that all within about a year's time frame. And multiple frac sites, multiple frac crews, um, very fast promotion cycle because it's a fast turnover cycle. So in order to reward you for that gritty lifestyle that George was alluding to, they're gonna give you more, but you've really got to pour yourself out. So, and I mean, you're talking like you're gonna work a swing shift and a grave shift, and then you'll have day and swing off to get grave and day as your next shift, and then to have swing and grave off for your next one, and it just rotates like that for 2 weeks. And some people they were like on call for that. Fortunately, frac wasn't on call. It was you do your 2 weeks, you do your 11 shifts, and then you go home for 6 days. But because it was so gritty and they knew you were green, they would throw in these little projects you had to do even on days off. Like, hey, well, technically you're on days off, but I want you to work on this presentation, or I want you to work on getting some shop experience. I need you to take this Chickson apart real quick. Can you do that for us? And I'm over here like, I don't know what this has to do with my job, but okay. And it's this well-roundedness that they want you to get through. So, okay, here I am. It's November. It's freezing cold, and you're taking apart this Chickson in like a really, like, just, you might as well be taking apart this really big stainless steel or mild steel cylinder that's got all these ball bearings in it. And the idea is they want you to learn how it works. And what better than to take it apart? And at the same time, they're like, oh, but we also need you to get ready for this operations school. And you're going to do that on your days off too, right? And you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do some of that. And before you know it, it's okay, operation school is here. Take off 2 months to go overseas and pretty much do this 8-week course that you're going to do so that way you get promoted. And everyone has to do it if you're going to be on the field engineer track. Otherwise, you have to transfer. So I did that for a while. That 2 months was crazy. I think it was 12 people went in, 4 people graduated, which is pretty low. Usually it's only like 2 out of 12 that don't make it. But this was a particular time in the oil industry where it was absolutely cutthroat. And when they want to cut people, oil has a really good way to do it. It's called make your job harder and take on more responsibilities. More people quit, and then cool, now your overhead is decreased. It's that simple. They're pretty ruthless about it, and there's so much corporate knowledge I learned from their tactics. Whether they were humane or not, it's another story. But just seeing how they were able to do it, people are very creative up there, like on like the real big corporate. And sometimes you may just be like, okay, they're just being selfish. Yes and no, but they're also they're bright. So going through this operation school, after I finished that, I was thinking, maybe I should look for something else. And I was thinking about the skills, and I go, well, in field engineering, you're going to learn some skills, and if you really like being outside in with a sledgehammer and putting together all these types of rigs, and then running a job and running the equipment, doing all this paperwork, fine. But typically, for like a chemical engineer, you're like, but maybe I need to do like a little more of a hybrid. So you do more stuff in the control room, and you're going to do some side projects, and then a little bit of stuff on the floor. So then I'm thinking more for a balance. So what kind of balance could you find? So I started thinking about California again, and I got myself in the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah, very different experience, just from all the different traveling I got to do, and not everyone gets to do that. So I should consider that a grateful time of my life, but at the time it felt like it was just you're going through the furnace. But
In that first year, I'm curious, did you think anything about bandwidth? Like when it came to like saying yes to projects or saying yes to tasks, or did you just say yes to everything?
I mean, it was voluntold is more of the word I think I'd use, which happens
Gotcha.
in a lot of companies, right? You don't get a say. It's that big, right? Like if you say no, we talked about saying no in our last podcast with George, and some companies you do that, and they're going to be like, okay, and they write your name on a list, and you start realizing like, I actually don't have as many. I don't have that many no's left. I think that's probably the problem with some of the bigger companies that can just get somebody else that quick. Um, and that's something that I had more of a trouble with my first job. These last two jobs I've had, not so much, um, which is good, right? You need to be able to say no if you're in a technical environment, especially if you're an advisor. If you're an advisor and you say no, you're not just trying to be a stickler. It's you have your reasons, and you'll probably provide an alternative path forward. So that way, it's not just no, I'm not going to do it. It's no, but maybe let's try another route. Um, and that's something you could get away with more in frac if you had an alternative, but it was so cookie cutter that
Mm.
you you pretty much are gonna have to just grind it out.
Yeah, yeah. I asked because I pretty much also said yes and was got the feeling of voluntold. But I think on the last time I was here, I talked about how I got asked to go to relocate to a different refinery. I don't know if I touched upon that, and I said no. And I was like, well, there goes my career at this place. I'm probably not going to move up, but luckily they actually were still open down the line. But you're right, it does feel like you have a certain number of no's to give, because they're going to stop asking, right? If you for new opportunities, I feel like you always have like three, maybe five at the most.
Of those kind of no's, like the
Those kind of no's.
because and people don't always see at the time, like when you think about relocation as like a career uh, direction, but it's one of those things that hey, you can say no to the relocation, but man, if there's something local and it may not be your favorite, but you know you want to stay local and you want to like move up, that's the you've spent your no. Maybe it's time to give them a yes, so that way they understand. Oh, this guy does want career development. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's being cognizant of it, and you're not always cognizant of it in the moment. Sometimes it's a Thursday afternoon, and you're thinking about Friday and the weekend because you've kind of got a life now, um, and they come all of a sudden. So it's hard to be always ready for that kind of stuff. Um,
I have, I have a question for all three of you. Let's probably start with Matt and then go down the line.
sure.
What was the moment where each of you knew, okay, I need to pivot from whatever I got myself into the next thing? Because yeah, the commonality I'm hearing from all three of you so far with the first job is just kind of just take what you got and then see what happens, and then learn the skills, learn the basis. But then there becomes this moment where you're like, okay, well, this isn't exactly what I want to do the rest of my life, at least in this short term. So how am I going to decide to pivot into the next thing? Like, what was that decision point for you, Matt?
Yeah. Well, my moment of that was kind of on a macro level, I guess. Recession kind of has a way of changing your perspective on what's going on. So I was working. So after college the first time, um, I had been working a lot of just kind of crappy jobs because that's what a psychology degree gets you. Um, and I'd finally gotten to a point where I was trying to do this project management thing for a residential construction company. And then the housing market exploded and I was out of a job. Not necessarily right away. It took a few months because it was a smaller company. They were trying to figure out what was going on and how to keep people because nobody knew what was going on. Um, And then I ended up getting downsized because ultimately project managers are overhead, and that's something important to know. That was probably one of the minor reasons that I turned down the engineering project manager job, because I knew that they were in fact expendable, even though you can tack engineer on the front, and I don't think it means anything. Um, and so, yeah, I kind of just sat with that for a while. I tried to look for other jobs, but the the brutality of what I was looking at was too obvious in that I didn't have any special skills. There would be no real reason for anyone to hire me. So, where I would be looking for jobs, I would be fighting other people that have generic skills for those jobs too. And so at that point, I'm just sitting in my apartment and thinking, you know what? I just have to try to get something that's valuable, because if I don't, like you had in your question, like this is the rest of my life. How am I supposed to do the rest of my life like this? And
Yeah,
I,
that insecurity kind of can emotionally wreck you. I mean, you mentioned that you came from a psychiatry background or a psychology background.
Psychology, yeah. I didn't get into the
So,
medical part of it. I probably wouldn't have lost my job if I had.
right. But it sounds like you'd be well aware of the emotional headache and heartbreak that comes from just losing your job and dealing with the financial stresses and going through the ringer and not wanting to repeat that again.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot, but I guess I don't know. Oddly enough, I kind of was very sober about it. I didn't really spend a lot of time waffling. I didn't necessarily know I would be able to do anything engineering related, but at least working in proximity to construction, I was very interested in how things were built. And probably one of my regrets of having that job was that I didn't get to spend time on the job site actually doing stuff as like an apprentice. If they had anything like that open, and they'd be like, yeah, we'll be willing to give you a shot with that. But I didn't have a truck, I didn't have a lot of tools, so it wasn't like I was prepared for something like that. But that was kind of what made me think about engineering, is like, well, I do actually like how things are built, and I'm interested in that kind of stuff. But I had no idea if I could do it. Um, in fact, I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to be able to do it, um, just based on my relationship with math and why I went to psychology in the first place. I had opportunities to do the harder stuff, but um, I didn't take it the first time around. So
Right. And then was that a similar experience for you, George? Was it economic pressures turning the screw on you to jump ship from Phillips, or was it a different um different pressures for you?
For me, it was definitely different pressures. It wasn't so much the economics. I mean, for me, it was more of oh, I think like the industry, like the industry knowledge that I was starting to collect, um, and how to expand my career. It seemed like I had like two options. It was like either be a like operations technical person or an automation technical person or go into management. And just the industry as a whole, it didn't line up with my core values. Because when I first got the job, it was definitely like I switched. I would say I switched to oil and gas for two things. One, I like the challenge. I think I talked about it last time. But two is definitely the economics of it. Just like biotech to oil and gas, like starting salaries. Oil and gas has higher starting salaries. That's no secret. So that's definitely what the push was. But then you know, as I rose up to it, I got voluntold to go into operations. I was in that yes mentality, just taking whatever, as you said. And the pivot was I went to this uh, seminar on hydrocracking. technology. It was in Emeryville, and they flew in people. It was an international seminar, so there was like, was it like 30 engineers from all over the world, and my reactor was actually was the example for the seminar.
Oh,
And so the engineer was like asking me, "Oh, George, is this right? Like, oh, what are the things that you do to solve this issue? Like, maybe other people can ask you about this after class." I'm like, "Sure." And so like I was kind of giving this knowledge, but none of that knowledge like excited me. None of it
Mm.
like responded to me. People were like, "Oh, is this the future?" I'm like, "I guess," but like, I mean, once we figure out either like solar batteries or nuclear energy, once we figure out other more resource like renewable energies, even though like my reactor was being uh, like refactored to actually take in renewable sources, still wasn't there. It didn't have that like spark in my values. Like I wanted something that like I can see as the future. I wanted to be have like a handprint on building something that is going to be sustainable and used by not only like this generation but the next generations coming forward, and it actually give a foundation towards how our society or how like civilization works, which I pivoted towards data engineering after that, right? People say you can read articles. There's like I think a New Yorker article saying that data is the new oil, and it's funny because I definitely feel that way. Where they had like a little, you could look this up. It's like Google, Amazon, Apple, and it's on top of an oil rig out. It's a very interesting image. And so I thought like, well, if I understand data, that touches on everything. And it's funny enough that I started on marketing data, which is there's this documentary on Netflix. Um, I forget what it was called, but it talked on cookies, on how people track your data, how people can actually use your images, social media, how it interacts with you. I learned all that in my first 1 year at Dropbox. Um, and so that aligned with my like core values. Like I actually understand now how when you click accept all cookies, when you click what website is this? Like how do you want to create a business? Now I can actually help out friends. Hey, I have this like cool little project idea for like consulting. And I'm like, hey, I can help you create a website. I can actually expand your business. And so I even have another friend that like wants to have like biosciences. He's like a food science guy. His name's Matt. Jake is if you remember him, we took chemistry with him a while ago, and he reached
It's the
out to
same
me.
Matt. It's the same
It's the
Matt.
same Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Not
But
Matt
not
Stebbin.
but not this one.
Not
No.
this one. Not Matt Stebbin.
Yeah. He's based out in West Sacramento, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Now he has a startup, and he reached out to me, and
Funny
I
enough.
actually, yeah, he reached out, and I told him like, no, I don't want to go into food science, but I can, kind of give you some tips how to scale. And so like you can give impact in different ways. So I wanted a job that was more impactful and lined up with my core values. And so that was kind of the push for my pivot.
makes sense. And then Jacob, was yours more of a core value, meaningful pivot, or is it more of an economic pivot, or how would you characterize yours shift from your first job?
Primarily, it was a culture thing, but economics had a play in the first one. So both on the first one, and then again values on the next one. But to talk about the food science guy, so yeah, organic chemistry 2012. That same Matt, he reached out to me too, and
Oh,
yes, that was about a couple years ago, and I've been in loose contact with him ever since, and that's been really fun. Their company is getting more funding, and they're starting to slowly build up, and that's been so cool to hear about like some of their like small success for us maybe, but for them, I mean that's just, I mean startups they're risky. So, but UC Davis helped them out to get it going, so it was so cool to see what's been going on at his company, and they've asked a couple other things this year, and it was so cool because they haven't gotten to the point where they messed up yet. And what I mean by that is like they bought a piece of equipment. It's like, it's not the one we wanted, and now we got to do all this retrofit. They have the chance to buy something they really want and then just nail it. And that's cool because from an engineering perspective, that's what we were trained for. We're going to give you the thing right the first time. So it's a dream. It's a dream to see it that way. Normally we walk into a plant, it is what it is. You have this hydrocracker, you have this reactor over here. Yeah, it doesn't have what we need, but we need you to make it do blank. Um, for once you can actually tell them, hey, listen, I know you got to listen to your investors, but this is what you need to buy if you want to like really have some long-term success. But yeah, for oil, it was definitely, to get back to your question, Julian, it was more of a, hey, it's getting kind of rough. I don't see myself being here forever. This was meant to be kind of a 5-year thing max anyway. So, okay, did I get what I needed? For the most part, yes. I probably wish I got a little more cash and a little more time in the field, but other than that, everything else was checked. So I go, well, what if I cut 80% and call it a day? And went into the pharmaceutical industry. And there I got so much on R&D scale up and some of the problems that typical manufacturing plants run into, not just like a frac mobile chemical plant. Now you've got something that is multiple process lines that do various chemistry, and they all have their different clients and their different problems. And I got to see so much of it, and to the point where I was just so done with it after. But it took a while. It took a long time. In frac, I mean, it only took about like a year, but in this case, it took about 6. So I mean, that's pretty good. But I really like what George and I were talking about, saying no too much. I eventually got to a point where it was, okay, so the thing I need to hop to isn't available. And then the other alternative that I wanted, which could have been a process engineer job, but I'm like, then you kind of throw away your life a little bit, depending on what project they throw you on. That happens a lot over there in like a scale-up world where you've got this new batch that you got to pilot. And I'm like, well, I kind of don't want to do that, at least at this time, and not this company. So jump ship there. And it was a good move, though, because now I kind of get to do more facility as far as upgrades and process. It's a little more chaotic working where I'm at now, but it's pretty cool in terms of some of the impact that they're not used to having like an intermediate engineer around. In fact, they're not used to having a team of intermediate engineers around. So that's been kind of cool because all of a sudden they're like, whoa, I never even thought of that. And I go, okay, well, glad we're working here because we're going to give you some advice. And they actually take it more often than some of these other cookie cutter plants where it's just you have 3 options and you got to pick. Versus now it's, well, we don't really have options. Can you give us some? That's the right. Okay, now we can help you because you're asking us to take on something that we're more of the, okay, you gave us a question, you have no idea, but maybe we can do something for you. And then they're actually grateful when something improves, which is also like a big win for us. We're like, all right, cool. So like we're earning our paycheck and there's like a real trajectory upward. It is more chaotic though, because you don't have the backing of so many other engineers. In field engineering, you could turn left, turn right, you'll always find one. If you turn to where I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, there are engineers up and down. There's some that are in project management, some that are in process engineering, facilities engineering. So there's always somebody. But here, for the first time, I'm like, ooh, you need to check yourself more because there's less people to verify with. And that's one of the downsides. So yeah, no, I'm glad I did the jumps where I did. And I definitely followed the first advice that we were talking about, which is if there's an opportunity in front of you where you can get a new skill set, taking it will help you, typically.
Right. And then I guess since I haven't spoken about my own experiences so far, at least in this podcast, I'll give a few tips and tricks I've learned along the way. So I mentor a lot of students in my lab. So I work, just as a quick background, I work in R&D for in an academic environment. So we're researching different highway material designs, asphalt and concrete. And in my lab setting, there's a lot of undergrads and graduate students who come through quarterly and are always looking to the next thing, gaining skills, gaining experience, gaining someone to write a letter of rec, what have you, right? So what I've noticed from all those folks filtering through our lab is that it seems to me the most um, ambitious, get after it undergrads and GSRs are the ones that are always pivoting while they're in academia. So what I noticed, especially with this one undergrad, she ended up going to Stanford in construction management. While she was doing her undergrad, simultaneously, I don't know how she did this. She was interning at 3 different places, and then she was president of ASCE, as well as I think the construction management group at UC Davis. And I was just thinking to myself, looking at her CV/resume, like, wow, this person's really trying out everything she can to filter in going the direction that she ultimately wants to go in. And then for civil engineering, there's like 5 sub-disciplines, right? There's geotech, transportation, structures, water, and environment. But within each of those, you can also do construction. So there's all these different possibilities that you could go into. It's a big banner engineering field. And seeing her basically shotgun and just try out everything and then settle in on construction management, um, it was cool because she had tried basically everything that she could. And then she, resolved to herself, well, I'm going to go this direction because this is the one I like the most from all my experiences in undergrad. So that even right out the gate before she gets her first job, which maybe she pivoted, I'm not sure. I would have to follow up with her. Um, at least going into her master's program, she was able to pretty confidently know that she would actually enjoy what she was about to study. Um, and more broadly, once she got into the workforce, um, I would assume that because of all that background experience that she got, she had a pretty easy time like navigating all these what would be for a wet behind the ears undergrad who had no internships and no opportunities to speak up besides just the coursework. Um, to navigate all those interviews and potential job offers pretty seamlessly. So I always think about her when I think about, oh, okay, well, this person seems to have the right mindset when it comes to just feeling things out and trying out um, different opportunities as they present themselves. And she happened to also uh, rise up the leadership ranks for a lot of those. So it's just very impressive to witness. Um, and I'm not sure who mentored her specifically, but I imagine that um, she sought as much help as possible, trying to figure out, okay, what should I do? And it's like, well, if you can manage it, do as much as possible. See where it takes you. Um, and that's just one story. It's a similar pattern that if you were to look at the meta student, like, oh, what's the pattern among all students that filter through the lab, the most successful ones versus the ones who seem like they're more trotting on by. And it's like, oh, well, the meta student has that tenacity about them where they're always striving to just try different things, try out different internships, go to office hours, do all these different things to try to, I guess, to find themselves ultimately and start the ground running once they graduate. Um, so it's always very impressive to see that once I hear about the students upon graduation, like, oh wow, you were able to get that together, and then I saw the background context. I was like, of course you did. Um, you got this, or clearly, yeah.
I had a question for the group, and you guys can chime in whatever you want. This is about just getting that first job and some of the like common mistakes you saw with people coming in, and then they bomb for like a few months trying to get themselves together again, and then if you have a case study of people who George is laughing because this happened in college too.
Perfect example.
Yeah, good. This is what I was hoping for. And some people don't even get up after. So take it away if whoever wants to talk about some common mistakes.
All right. I'm not gonna call the person out, but I'm in good terms with him because I gave him
Okay.
the advice. Uh, he's a classmate of ours. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's all you gotta say, man.
Uh,
Copy.
and so when he first came out, and he was in a different department at first, and then he switched into operations. And I actually I was about 1 year with this crew as their automation engineer, because as you know, oil and gas has their crews. And so I knew most of the names, had a good relationship with them. And the best advice I can give you, this is like what you should do, is don't try to tell people how to do their job when you don't even know how to do your job.
There it is.
All right? Because listen, like literally the first like month or two, maybe even 3 months, just listen to what people are doing, because you're gonna start creating like a list of all the problems, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is what I think I should do. This is what people are the pain points that I see. You can kind of cross them, and then you'll see like you'll get the true image of what you need to work on. Um, and what this person did came in and started just going straight into theory. Started going, well, in college, you're supposed to do this and this. Why isn't this working out? Hey, I think you should do this and this. And I'm like, whoa, 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 slow your roll, slow your roll. Just learn about how they do it. Maybe understand why they do it that way. There's always a historical reason. Then break it down, create analogies, learn how to communicate with them, because obviously you're a new person. This is their environment. It's like someone coming into your home and saying, "Hey, I want to remodel your kitchen." That's the same kind of vibe. Like
Every
that's not
day.
gonna right
Yeah.
every single day. And it's like, hey, who is this new like first person engineer straight out of college thinking, bright eyed and like trying to tell me what to do? That's not gonna fly. Not very easily. However, if you understand their communication style, if you like just sit down with them, be one of the crew, then you can start giving your ideas. Then you can like make sure that you're being listened to. Or if there's a culture already, like understand the culture, right? That's kind of what I'm getting at. Understand the culture, because if there's a culture where they're promoting new ideas in the beginning, then go for it. Be curious. Be curious. Don't be bossy. There's a difference. And if you don't know the difference, you'll figure it out because then people won't want to collaborate with you. But if you understand the difference, then people will start approaching with ideas because they want to see what's your opinion, compare with their notes, and then you start creating solutions. You start creating like a prototype of something, and then you start implementing it. And guess what? You're gonna have success instead of just someone, because this engineer would talk to me and tell me, hey, why are they not listening to me? Like, this is correct. And I would like, okay, let me put my theory hat back on.
Yeah.
And I go over like, well, you are correct. I was like, why? But if I'm right, why are they just ignoring me? I'm like, well, you're just telling them what to do. You're not really like listening to them. And so if you're not listening to them, why would they listen to you? And there are about 15 people here with the average 6 to 10 year experience. This is like month 3 for you. Why would they listen to you? And he would be like, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I need to step back. And afterwards, he started like approaching them, asking how their day was, asking what the problem is. What's wrong with this pump? What's wrong with this distillation column? You didn't get this order. Like, do the little things. Like, honestly, I would just go up to them like, hey, do you want me to drive this part for you, like to the shop? I can do it. Hey, you want me to do a work order for you? I can like talk to the project manager. Like little favors always help out, because it seems like, hey, you're not shying away from getting the job done, as opposed to being a manager, being management. Like I am technically management in their eyes, but because they know that I'm willing to help them out, regardless if it falls in my kind of core responsibilities. Obviously, don't stretch yourself thin to do stuff that you're gonna step on somebody else's toes, but just do like little things like, hey, is this okay? Can I help you out on this? Like taking like, even though this wasn't like quote unquote okay for like union rules, but sometimes I would like take a sample because I'm on the way to the shop anyways. Like, hey, I can take a sample for you. I'm I have all my safety certifications. I know how to take a sample. And they would give me the sample, and then I would take it for them. And they'll be like, yeah, totally fine. Thank you. Like, you just saved me time. Now I can like watch this pump, or I can take a break because I've been on watching this pump or watching this for 5 hours straight. Little things, when like you just win people over that way. and that creates like a team cohesiveness. Like you're part of the team, part of the crew, part of the team, kind of thing. I think that's really important.
I'm really glad you mentioned work orders and like being able to listen, because that's like a currency of the environment. Is okay, this guy's willing to listen, he's willing to do some of the little things, he's not shying away from the problem either. And it's more of a, well, he's going to give an idea in a way that's like not irritating, because that people are at jobs, it's already irritating for a lot of people just to even exist working at a job. So you want to be like, okay, this guy is not trying to make my day worse. He's actually, maybe if I work with him, things will get a little better. And if you keep making that reputation, then it's like, okay, you walk in the room, they're like, all right, cool, this guy's not going to like make my day worse. Chances are he's probably going to help out.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's the currency of working with, like, especially with people that aren't exactly in your department,
Yep.
because you can't exactly just, it's not like the 19th century where you just like crack a whip and be like, all right, move this because I'm a higher rank than you. It's 21st century. People like being treated like a human being, so tends to work.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, I guess I had a friend that would make a good anecdote for this too, but um, what George said kind of made me start thinking about something else. Um, I guess it's, I had brought up um, technical knowledge earlier, and you know, I don't know. I guess maybe in being older, I didn't make this mistake coming out as an engineer, thinking, oh, well, my education means that I'm a step above, you know, these people that are helping out with, at the technician level. I would say that I probably feel like I've missed out more often when I have to do my own job, um, when I'm working with technicians, because usually I don't work with technicians. Um, they would either be electricians or, you know, fluid technicians, anything like that that are installing skids or just modules of projects. It's like they could tell me more about a pump than I had ever learned in school. I wouldn't know how to clear a deadhead of anything when I came in. It's like I understand the concept of what a deadheaded pump is, but in certain scenarios, when they're watching the pressure happen in real time, they're like, all right, don't touch that valve. That was the one you wanted to touch. We need to touch this one. And you can either be like, okay, he's been doing this for 6 to 10 years, like you said, or I could be like, no, I went to college. No, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna do this one. And it's like, okay, congratulations, genius, you just burned the pump out. Thanks. It's like now we have to order another one. So, I would say that education is great and everything, but um, experience helps you a lot more in the here and now, and in what you're directly going to be working with. Part of being in a team is understanding that you have other things to learn from people. Whether or not you've racked up 20 years of experience, I could still guarantee you could learn something from somebody that's working underneath you. If you come into a senior role way later in life, there are still things that you need to pay attention and have some humility with, um, because you're going to be working with these people a lot, and you don't want them to be pissed off at you, and you definitely don't want them to think that you're some holier than thou person, because then if you pivot your management style or something to be like, oh well, my door's always open, all these people already have this opinion of you. It's like, why the hell would I want to go talk to this person? It's like, I don't care if their office is open. Like, I don't want to go and have them just browbeat me and how stupid I am, because that's what they're going to kind of assume. That's the precedent that you set at the beginning. So, you got to be cognizant of that stuff.
Yeah, I guess I see a lot of purely academic students filter through the lab, and the lab is more like a hybrid academic slash real world work environment. So the purely academic students, sometimes they ask me how did you develop the intuition to know to do this, that, or the other? And I don't really have a clear-cut answer because it's an amalgamation of, all my experiences growing up in a rural part of the state, cutting trees and helping my dad and doing yard work, all the way up to, oh, this intricate test procedure that's called out by AASHTO or ASTM. But they just see me performing the thing almost intuitively without seeing all the background context of where I got all the knowledge. And they want to get to where I am in that moment, understandably, because depending on what I'm asking of them, it might be a little more cognitive load for them to get up to speed and try to know exactly how I want things instead of just spelling it out, or just assuming that they have for lack of a better term, common sense when it comes to, oh, I thought this was pretty straightforward. Like, there's some things which kind of make me cringe. I've had to teach some of the students how to sweep the
A
lab.
broom?
Floor?
Yeah, because
Wow.
their parents or their home life, they never learned. So I would have to stop some of the students from like kicking up a dust storm because they're sweeping too hard. Uh,
Just doing it in
so,
giant strokes instead of just trying to get a pile
right. So I
organized.
was so there's some students like that where they just have no context for simple stuff from our perspective. So, oh, you just sweep or vacuum or do these very basic life tasks, all the way up to the more understandably complicated stuff like, oh, can you change oil on the engine, or can you find this one specific tool in the toolbox that's buried beneath all these other things? Because it's like, well, not everyone knows the names of all the tools. Like if you tell someone to get an 8 millimeter hex wrench, if they don't know what a hex wrench is, then um, they don't have that foundational knowledge. So when you're in an academic environment, getting all those people up to base speed is a big challenge. Um, but that's the trade-off when you have an international organization, because I there is no common baseline. Everyone has a different um, starting point. Some don't do any chores, and then they come to a soils lab playing in the dirt, right? And it's a culture shock because they thought they'd be at a computer all day doing computer models, and instead they're separating out different size aggregates and getting dusty and having to wear a respirator. And for some of especially the GSRs that have filtered through the lab throughout the years, it's a rude awakening when they go from, I guess, the elites of their country, wherever that may be, to feeling like they're a second-class student just doing grunt work. Um, so, at least from what I've noticed, the the things not to do if you don't really know um, like how to sweep, right? The things not to do is just manage. Well, the things to do is to manage your expectations, right? So a lot of the students who've either quit like within a few weeks had different expectations than what was expected of them on the job. And then just having a more can-do personality, like being willing to learn. Because the students, again, who've quit almost immediately, um, just are extremely abrasive and arrogant, kind of like the example you gave, George, where it's like, yeah, you know some things, but there's a certain way of doing things. And you should probably consider learning why we're doing the things first, besides just ignoring and being on your phone all the time, or not learning anything, or not asking questions.
Yeah, be humble,
Um,
right?
be
Yeah.
humble. Yep.
I have one thing to add to your manage expectations thing. So I'm gonna bring this. I'll now venture the example of one of my friends. So when he was not an engineer, he was a business major, and when he first graduated, he did not manage his expectations um, at all. I remember him looking for jobs, and he was looking for a place that would provide him his own office, and he would have an assistant. And to me, I was just like, I am not a business major, but I'm pretty sure you're never gonna find that. This is your first job. What are you doing?
Right.
Um, and it took him a while to get out of that mind frame. I had to imagine it was probably pretty difficult for him because he was pretty invested in having his own assistant and his own desk in an office that had a door. And yeah,
Corner office. Is that what
I don't think he was looking for a corner office. For some reason, that was the only thing he left off.
you meant?
Yeah. So it's like without, managed expectations, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail in a sense because if you expect a corner office on your first day and you're not an executive, um, there's going to be a rude awakening when you get to the first day. You're interacting with anyone, they're not even talking to you really because you're fresh blood, so to speak. And you kind of have to, learn the ropes of, as with any first job, really.
I'd add
Um,
have lower expectations than the typical average by about half a standard deviation. Because
sure.
typically it's going to be a little under what you think. So just lower it a little bit, you'll be happier. And if not, then forget I said anything. But typically it'll be a little lower than what you might expect.
Moreover,
And
being happier, you'll be fine. You can reassure people that they'll be fine. You're not sacrificing some giant ideal that's going to ruin your life if you compromise because in the end, the easiest person to fire is the most difficult. So you don't want to be that person.
yeah, and I guess I would just finish off with what was it? The I forgot. Sorry.
Managing expectations. That
E
was
yeah, it'll come back to me.
okay.
Sure.
I have something to add,
Yeah.
Julian, where when you said not knowing how to sweep. It's funny because when I was when I first jumped into it was a turnaround. I was in automation still, but I like they give you like turnaround experience to see if you can kind of handle an operations environment.
Sure.
And one of the first things that you're supposed to do when you're getting equipment ready for maintenance is something called a blind. Are you guys familiar with what a blind is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jake. Okay. Matt, perfect. I'm going to use you as an example because I did not either. And I was in charge. All right, George, you're going to handle our blinds list. You're going to kind of maintain this, make sure everybody has all the equipment necessary. And we're going to have to do this. We have about, it was like 4 days to put in all the blinds. And I'm like, all right, guys, I'm going to have to ask. And it's like uncomfortable to ask this because everyone's talking about it like it's normal, right? Like sweeping is
Jargon.
a normal thing, right? And
Yeah.
and in front of a lot of experienced operators and my boss being there, I'm like, all right, this is a stupid question. And now I know there's no such thing as a stupid question when it comes to trying to do your job. There are stupid questions. I mean, like rude questions or stupid questions. But I asked the question, what's a blind? I don't know. And some of the operators were, some of them were like making jokes, like how does an operations? They didn't teach you in college what a blind is because you can't expect college to teach. If you guys remember our process equipment class, they didn't really teach us that much. I'm gonna be real with you.
You don't have to be real with me. I remember. And
Yeah,
it was whether for what we needed, it was pretty short. Sorry,
very
sorry,
short.
Davis. But it was short.
They taught you
Yeah,
to use the ad cache, the popular one. That was
yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that. So a blind, Matt, for since you don't know, is when you are getting ready to say go into a pump, right? There's there's an input, there's an output, there's all the tubing, right? So to make sure that liquid will not get through, and it's a safety thing, you put in a flat plate in between flange. Flange being where the pipe actually hits with the bolts. So you put in the blind in there and that you have to lock. Was it LTT? Lock test. What am I got? Lock, tag, and try. You lock it. You lock the blind in. You tag it, saying what the possible liquid is or the possible gas, and then you try it to make sure that nothing can get through. So that's like kind of the management. But I can't even get past step one. And like I was embarrassed, and I was just like, "Oh man!" Like it's scary to be uncomfortable. So part of that being like I said, be humble is you got to put yourself in a vulnerable spot to ask for help. And in that first year, you get a pass. I'm gonna tell you right now, the first 6 months in a new job, you get a pass on everything. Ask every question you can think of, everything, even the most basic things. Don't be scared. Like that's the perfect time to ask because you don't want to ask a simple question, "What's a blind?" when I'm now an operations engineer in charge of the unit that has 5 years experience, and I don't know what a blind is. When say I'm talking about it and I'm using the word as if I know, but say, "Hey, what is it?" If an intern's asking me and I can't explain it, that I've done something wrong. So I've had it. You got to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually remembered what I was going to say. It in speaking of things that should go without saying but are still necessary to say, um, don't be lazy when you're the newbie. Like, especially in an academic environment, um, it's very, very tempting because obviously we're not going to give new people like extremely critical research that's millions of dollars and all this other uh, risk reward issues. But at the same breath, if you start out the gate just taking shortcuts all the time, showing up late, all this very, very should be basic stuff, but establishes your work ethic and just your drive. If your best foot forward is just pure another, uh, uh, yeah, pure laziness, then you might fail up, but there is a maybe into middle management or something, but there is a plateau from that laziness. Um, and it's a temptation for sure because we've all been there where we don't exactly want to do 110% all the time. You can get burnt out. But in the same breath, it's like, well, especially if you're a newbie and you're establishing yourself, just not not striving and not pushing yourself to do the best that you can. It's just really, really setting yourself up for failure.
It's also the foundation of what is going to be your credibility at that place, right? So
Right.
if you keep saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, I did that," you know, I'm sure in my first week or month I did some of that stuff, and if you do it too much, you're gonna start saying things, and people are like, "You sure? Are you sure you did that?" And that's almost an insult to how you've. It's an insult, but it's an appropriate insult to how you've been conducting yourself. If people can't trust you when you've been there for a few years, and it's like, well, I know this person. I always have to double check their work because that's just how it is. That's probably not a good thing. Um, and also, when you're a newbie, it's probably not the time to be saying no a lot. Because if a senior person comes along and says, even if you look busy, like, hey, I have something to show you real quick, um, they probably mean that it actually is real quick, and this is your one opportunity to see it, and it may be months or years or never go by, and you will never see it again, and they want to teach you something. You shouldn't be saying, "Oh, I'm really slammed right now," because that senior person is probably busier than you, and they're taking time out of their day to realize that you don't know this thing, and they want to show you. So you should be like, yes, put down your stuff and then go and learn this little thing that, you know, maybe doesn't really seem like a big deal, but you never know when it comes in useful.
That's huge. That's huge. I think I did that with one of my interns. My intern's like, "Oh, I got to finish this project." I'm like, "No, no, you don't. No, you don't. This is impactful. This is impactful. Like you need to know this."
Yeah, sometimes people they're so busy in their mind, but at the same understand the tiers of work. Like you can be really busy with like your tier, but if someone's like what Matt's saying is you've got a senior level guy that's like 3 tiers up from you, that's you're gonna want to see this. This is not only gonna help you, this is gonna put you in the right mindset to deal with the next tier of work that you're not even doing yet. Which great idea, right? Because now you're talking about career direction. That's a lot better than just, yeah, you're just gonna have to finish your tier of work until it's time for you to do the next one. It's no, when you see that, that's a bridge to your next direction, your next foresight.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act between being not being a yes man and a pushover, just doing whatever someone tells you to do, versus being someone who's dependable and reliable. Like it's a big difference, you know, because yes men just you push them and they fall over and do your bidding, and you feel kind of bad for them, but you realize, well, yeah, I can use them, sure. But then if they stand their ground on occasion and say no, like build up that grit, so to speak, but they pull through when things are tough and you need to count on them. That's the type of trust that you want to establish in your coworker and your subordinates, because it's like, yeah, well, they know what they've learned over time to gauge, oh, is this really important? Or can I put this aside and help out my peer who really needs help in this moment? So learning that comes with time, of course, and working your way through the organization. But once that skill set gets sharpened, you whenever you do say no, you can still retain the title of, oh, that guy's reliable and dependable. I can always count on him, even though you have established that sometimes you can't. But it's not meant to be a literal, yes, I can always count on them. It's more like when push comes to shove, that person will be there when I need them most.
Yeah, so it's that building of reliability and reputation that people know you for in the local environment, because that's something else that people forget. I mean, you're coming from like senior year of college, and then now all of a sudden you're at this new job, total transformation. You're back at the bottom of the totem pole. You got to rebuild, and because it's a lot better than staying where you are as day one new guy. Day one new guy, you don't want to stay there forever, so you want to get to a new safer ground. How do you do that? Better reputation, the work ethic, having some kind of career direction, being a team player. And people always want to have that for the teams they want, because typically they're running into the trouble of, well, this guy's really talented, but I can't work with him. Or this guy is totally a workaholic, but he's doing all these projects that I don't need him to do. And he's really hard to like actually get him to go a particular direction because he's just working on everything. So everyone wants to have like that reliable team player that has like a good pair of ears. So you guys hit a lot of the same notes I had, and we didn't share anything, by the way, for those who are watching. I guess the last question I had is, so we were talking about the common mistakes. Is there anything you guys have seen that like was a really good thing to do, by practical examples at work? And you guys can chime in as you please.
Actually, yeah, I have one. So there's this undergrad who used to be in the military. He started working at our lab. So he's an older guy in his mid 30s. Most of the undergrads are more 18 to 22, kind of from high school to college directly. But he actually had military experience. And there's always one thing he told me that stuck in my mind, because he actually had leadership experience out when he was doing his tour. And he said that the military runs on cookies and coffee. And I asked him what exactly he meant by that. And like, he was like, oh, that, yeah, when you have one of your superiors and you need to meet with them or just do a favor for someone, no one's going to turn down cookies or coffee or whatever sweet treats you can give them. It's something that they'll always appreciate and it'll stick out in their mind. Like, oh yeah, that's the guy who gave me cookies and coffee. I like that guy right off the bat, right? So it's establishing like this very simple baseline of, okay, this guy um thinks of the group enough to like get this very simple thing that anyone can do, but it's that personalized effort um of just looking out and having that human engagement, so to speak. Of, okay, yeah, this person thought of others and he stands out for that. It has nothing to do with skills or anything like that, maybe except knowing people and whatnot, but and human empathy, which are important. Um, but it does speak to the character of the person just right off the bat, doing that gesture, especially in a work environment where, like we've mentioned earlier, among the four of us, not everyone wants to be there all the time. So how can we alleviate kind of the suffering, so to speak, of having to go to work every day? Cookies and coffee. Why not?
And you guys are hitting on all the points that I don't know if you, for those who don't know, I've actually started a new job at Grammarly, writing
Oh,
assistant
nice.
AI, and you guys are both of you are hitting the exact strategy I use in this past month. So we have like one-on-ones, right? Where we call them coffee chats,
Okay.
and so like it's like cookies and coffee, and we actually had an in-person event my second week of work, and that was completely optional. It wasn't even my team. Like it's in-person events depending on what department you're in. The engineering one is actually next week. This was like a marketing and sales one, and I actually support like marketing and sales. And I figured, hey, it's probably good to just mingle with these people. And I just reached out, hey, I'm actually nearby. I know it's at the San Francisco office. Could I actually come in and just like talk with you guys? No one's gonna say no to like, hey, we can grab a beer, we can grab a drink, or we can get cookies, we can get tea, whatever it is. People are always down for it, and it creates like, because when you ask somebody for that you don't know, hey, I need this, let me put in a ticket or let me put in a work order request, and like I don't know who this person is, I'll put it in the queue, I'll get to it when I need to, as opposed to like, hey, this person actually, again, back to this person did me a favor, or like, oh, I actually know this person, I can trust his work order, this isn't some BS work order, this actually will have an impact on the company as a whole or as the business as a whole. And so I did that. I think it's very important. And it's funny because I think a coworker of mine still hasn't met with the entire team. Well, I'm pretty close. We have like 15 people on the team. I have like two or three more people to have conversation with, and it's not even like work related. It's just like, what are you into? Like, how do you like? What are your hobbies? Like, oh, that's really cool. Like, you can create a synergy between just like lifestyle as opposed to synergy of work ethic. Like, work ethic is important, and I think you should have cohesiveness of it, but just like my friend does some very intricate my teammate. See, he's my teammate, but I call him a friend because he does martial arts, and he does a very intricate like Korean martial arts, and I'm like, oh, I'm really into Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And and we started just like talking about that. Turns out he traveled, he's about to go on sabbatical, and then they come like, hey, I actually have this project that is pretty interesting. I don't have a person that can cover for me because I'm going sabbatical. And just natural things come out of having a conversation, of treating your coworkers like human, like a human being. Like, you can go from just being an acquaintance to being a friend to even being a best friend. Like, I would say my manager has been like a mentor to me and a very close friend of mine. And he knows my work ethic. He knows how I am as a person. And funny enough, even knows what my weaknesses are, and he actually can mentor me on my weaknesses. So like, you open yourself up, and like whoever gave you that advice, Julian, I like that's huge kudos, because I've never heard that, cookies and coffee. That's a great way to put it, because you create a connection with them,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what I've been doing in this one month, creating a connection. That's yeah.
As far as anything else on the podcast, you guys have anything else you wanted to add? I had many stories I wanted to jump on with George with some of the common mistakes, but that would take too long. We could talk about that later. We could probably have its own section.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I talked my way right past my exit point at 7:30 because the conversation was so good. But I probably do need to go at 8. So I don't know. I guess I can offer up final thoughts for me or something.
Yeah.
As
Yeah,
a
go
Sure,
for
go
it.
ahead.
combination with your question, so I don't know. Generally, people. So I had started out with giving the advice of just do whatever you can to get to get your foot into whatever door you're trying to get into. I guess that advice would probably translate beyond when you're looking for a job. It would translate to your job too. Um, so, like in automation, people going into automation always have PLCs in mind. The controller, people want to program the controller, like that's the big thing. And I fell into that at the beginning. Like that was what I was amped up. I was chomping at the bit to get to do anything with the controller, which is the brains of everything. It takes in all the code. It does all of the commands for actions and stuff like that. And I never got to do that. Still, after 7 years, I've probably never really been able to just get out a controller and program the entire thing. It's always been a goal, in all of my annual reviews and stuff. And I know it's been a goal for every intern that's come in. It's been a goal of everybody who has switched to work at this company. And other people have been able to do it, but not me. And I would encourage people not to have your sights so focused on the one thing that you got in your mind to go into that particular job, that particular industry. Don't hold that in your head as what you must do. Um, because in general, the whole company has had to shift its paradigm because of me. Not that I'm tooting my own horn, but I'm told that I'm a very talented engineer. I'll accept that. That's fine. Um, but I don't have this PLC experience. And I was told uh, fairly early in my career that, I would hit a ceiling and I wouldn't be able to be promoted if I didn't get this PLC experience. And so every year it was my goal because I want to get promoted. At the same time, I don't really care. I like to learn things and I like to build my skill set, and I figure, and if you work for the right company, this can happen. I figure it'll be seen and I'll raise up the ranks anyway. So in general, over that period of time when everyone else is working with PLCs and getting this coveted experience, I'm taking all of the scraps. And so, if people know enough about control systems, you know that the PLC is one part of hundreds to thousands of pieces. And so while everybody has all of this experience with this one piece, I'm the one that has the experience with everything else. And I'm the only one in the entire company that supposedly has this level of experience with all this other stuff. And so everybody wants to talk to me. That's not necessarily ever been one of my goals in life, but it at least got me past one of the promotion bottlenecks that we've had, um, to where I've been a lead engineer, which is great. I guess I hadn't really adapted to having expectations of ever being in a lead position because of what everyone told me, that the PLC experience lack would hold me back. Um, but, I would say that when you go into an industry, it's important to know how everything fits together. And you'll find a place in that matrix of stuff that you have to do where you're going to be really good, you're going to be rare, which you want to be, and whether you like it or not, you'll be in a position to teach other people, which means that the company needs you, which means that it's easier to ask for a raise, which means that it's less likely for you to leave. Um, and it's more likely that you'll feel valuable just in general if you're able to telegraph your knowledge to other people, and you know that the company appreciates it and the people who are receiving the information find it valuable. So I would encourage people to not have tunnel vision when they go into a job. You may think that you're going in there to work on one thing, but there's probably a lot more there for you to be able to work on than you even realized. And just don't close yourself off to that because it wasn't what you expected.
Right on, Matt. Thanks
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And then, do you have something to add, George? Because I have a couple things.
Yeah. I feel like Matt, you touched on a big thing. I feel like Jake, I'll give you a quick common mistake, and I made this mistake
Nah,
in my first year.
you did well, by the
Um,
way. That's why I didn't want to say anything else, like for a good summary. So go ahead.
yeah. So I think my biggest mistake, because we talk about a lot of successes, and Matt, I would agree, you're a talented engineer, and that's a
Thank
great
you.
success.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate
I think
that.
I think most of us have great success in our career. And then I give you everybody kudos here because it's a lot of hard work. But you learn a lot from your failures. So I'll express one of my mistakes that I did in my first year, and I feel like I actually didn't really know how to tackle this maybe until like maybe year 3 or 4 of my career. And funny enough, my wife has started a new career. She's 6 months in as a full-time engineer, software engineer, and the biggest thing I told her is like, hey, there's something I want you to do that I wish I could tell myself. And it is understand how to advocate for yourself. And what I mean by that is in school, you could do work, right? But there is a TA or a teacher that is reviewing and grading your work. In a company, no one's grading your work. No one's giving you feedback. Like in a sense, no one has an obligation to give you feedback. Let me say that again. People are willing to give you feedback. However, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to, and I feel like ambitious people is, and I'm going to connect this to Julian, where you talked about, you had a researcher or an intern, right, that went to Stanford and very
Undergrad,
ambitious, right,
yeah.
undergrad, right. Ambitious people tend to ask for things, and they tend to advocate for this. They look out for themselves, and a lot of people, me, I was too shy. Like either I was too shy, or I didn't feel like I had the space, or I didn't feel like I could. Hey, I wanted to, like, again, I wanted to do full blown like process dynamics. I wanted to like start a whole control scheme from scratch. I thought that was so exciting because that's what I wanted to do as an automation engineer as well. And then you do little pieces of it, and I was like, this has to get me promoted. And like people's like, well, that's not really quite the important thing. It's more about, how do you impact the business? Everyone kept talking about impact the business. Like, what does that mean? And so it kind of blends into this politics slash like bureaucracy of knowing how to ask, when to ask, how to position your project, because you can do an amazing project that has a great impact. The easy projects to advocate is the one that has a dollar sign to it, right? Like, oh, I did this project. It's about a 10% increase in revenue or an ROI. When you're a new engineer, you don't even know what these like terms are. Maybe you learned it from your business class and like, but what does it actually mean? All right, to the company. Like you're not a finance person. Like when you talk about lifetime value, you talk about net revenue, you talk about gross revenue, you talk about depreciation value, you talk about all this stuff. And I've told my wife like, hey, like, what's the revenue of your company? She's like, I don't know what that is. I'm over here worried how to just like get something to production, just how to get approval, just how to get reviews, like because and you should be as a beginner, like as a newbie, you are worried about just getting your code out and making sure it's top quality because that's what you're worried about. That's what you're like focused on to like get that promotion of like, hey, am I producing quality work? However, really try to learn, and it's not something I feel like you can accomplish in your first year. Maybe talented people are, but I think you have to start building that muscle. It's like going to the gym, right? You want to get to 225, but you got to start at 125. Like you got to start somewhere. And I feel like if you start in your first year, how to like, and ask your, like, have that talk with your manager. There's some people that don't even have what I call one-on-ones with their managers. Like they don't, maybe, and they maybe have a talk with them once a month. I feel like that's too short. Once a week, like even just having like a personal talk, like just, hey, what can I improve on? What are the things you look for? How do you quantify success? Because if you understand how your manager quantifies success, they, because their job, if they're doing it right, is, hey, my job is to get you more money and to promote you. Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what you're there for, right? You're there at a company to get money for whatever else you want to do. You're not really there to like you have all these like fluffy things like the most easy one is like, oh, we're a family. Like you're not a family like at work. Like your coworkers at the end of the day, you could be friends outside of work. But
Right.
at the end of the day, like you're there for money, getting promoted, having impact. So understand how does the culture at that company value that, and like learn how to advocate for yourself within those values if they align. And if they don't, I think that's a signal to like, hey, maybe I should find a different place.
And I have a little corollary to that. What you mentioned with managers wanting to get you more money. So I I got promoted uh, fairly unexpectedly. Um, I think it was this year. My time is my time spectrum is all messed up. So I work in a consultancy, and I guess another good way to look at this, at least from a raw money in money out type of scenario, if people aren't quite sure what you mean on the corporate level, George, is that, I kind of asked them, is like, okay, well, what does this mean? Does this mean that I have to work the same 60 to 70 hour weeks that I've been working in order, right up to this promotion? Is that why you're promoting me, so that I keep doing this and breaking my own back? And their answer was pretty simple. It was like, no, you've just amassed enough skills that we'll feel comfortable charging people for that level of time for you. And so, that could be another way to look at it. In a corporate environment, it might be a little bit different because they don't directly have a customer that they're charging, an hourly wage for you. Um, you're passively or actively working behind the scenes on something that will generate the money, and you know, probably a different calculus, but I think
Mhm.
it flows both ways depending on what kind of company you work for.
Yeah. Yeah. As a contractor, you are actually measured on impact and value. So because I started out as a contractor in software, and that's exactly how they told me. It's like, well, we're charging you, $100 an hour as a contractor. Are you actually giving that value back to the company? If not, then as a contractor, they can just end your contract right there. Right.
Very true. Yeah. All right. Well,
So
with
what
that,
I would
I'm gonna bid everyone farewell. Thank you for having me on. I'm glad I could be here for half an hour longer than I thought. But I do have to drop off now. I hope I'll watch the rest of the conversation that you guys have after I'm gone.
Right on, Matt. Thanks for coming.
Well,
Really glad
thanks,
having you
Matt.
on.
say about,
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Cool.
yeah, all I wanted to, because we're probably coming up on that, and
Hmm.
regardless, all I wanted to add towards the end was maybe some more personal growth um, concepts that can probably help you out at the job. So what I've written down is stuff like, oh, get out of your head, because obviously you're going to be nervous once you start any job, let alone your first job. And those insecurities and all of those self doubts are going to spring forward and try to sabotage you before you can even have the opportunity to succeed. And yeah, you can tell yourself, yeah, I'm not going to get in my head. I'm not going to get in your head. Well, you're telling yourself that while you're in your head, right? So a more productive mindset in that sense would be like, well, just know how to with time, because it's a process, because you get that in your head this at different phases throughout your life. Like my version of being in my head in high school is not the same as it is right now, and I'm very skeptical it will be the same 10 or 20 years from now. There's different there's a different foundation at each level of my life that I'm starting from. And that said, for like my own personal narrative and everyone else's for that matter, um, it's not final. It's yet to be written. So you can take the pen of your life, your little self-authoring story, what have you, and change course, change direction. Um, because one of the worst things you could do to yourself is uh, take away the opportunities from your future and just resign yourself to, well, just dreams and aspirations that you never felt the drive or desire to at least try to pursue. Um, it's kind of like you're stealing your future away from you if you go down that thought pattern. So to mitigate that, it's like, well, you gotta give yourself baby wins, incremental wins here and there, and um, be realistic, but keep that drive about you, so that you can reflect back on the totality of your life and recall, oh yeah, this is the moment where things really clicked for me, and I chose to, well, I guess for me, since I'm bringing it up, get out of my head and push forward towards what I'm trying to get after. Um, and yeah, just really pushing yourself and growing from your mistakes. All of those are always, regardless of your job, we're always going to pay it forward for your future self. And as you're young, I think all of us can attest to this. Um, the mistakes don't sting as much as we get older and allegedly wiser. But even saying that, being older, you're still allowed to make mistakes. Um, that's just part of being human. And unless we want to all become robots and become one with the singularity or whatever, the simulation, um,
Right.
we're still humans at the end of the day. So we have to afford ourselves that latitude.
For sure. And I'll put all this in the timestamps below so that way we can get an idea of like a summary. And it's cool for me too because then like when it's all built, once the podcasts are done, it's easier to be able to look at and see how the long form is broken down. And I'm really glad you guys got to give all this feedback. Um, I'm still doing mentorship stuff on the side every now and then, so this is to add to the pile. But also, it's just so much fun. It's so much fun hanging out with you guys and doing all this. So thanks again for being on this, guys, and thanks again for those who are watching. And I hope you guys have a good one.
See ya.
Right. So yeah, thank you.